Well, you need to come hang out with us, man. So how have you been? I know that you've been covering the Titans along with college football. It's I guess we'll start off with the NFL for a moment. Just what a terrible AFC South. Even the Texans, who I root for, they're good, but they kind of backed their way into the playoffs. They were better than that, but certainly the end of the season for them was pretty bad.
Well, let's call a spade first off. It's a terrible division, the AFC South. No one can seemingly get their act together other than the Texans, who were disappointing this year and still were able to win the division. So the Colts are a mess. Jacksonville has always been a mess. The Titans right now are arguably, I think, the worst franchise in the NFL. It's terribly mismanaged. Once again, the news today that GM Rand Carthon has been fired. It's owner Amy Adams Strunk cutting the baby in half yet again. She tried this move before, firing John Robinson midseason, keeping Mike Vrabel around, then bringing in a new GM that didn't get along with Mike Vrabel. So she fires Mike Vrabel and leaves Rand Carthon. Well, now Rand Carthon and the new coach, Brian Callahan, they're not having success. So let's get rid of the GM and keep the head coach there. At some point, you got to blow things up and start from scratch. And, organizational charts exist for a reason. The Titans continue, even with their statement today, to float out this sort of hocus pocus. We're going to be a collaboration. We want the coach and the GM and the president of football operations to work together and have everybody be better than the sum of the parts be better than the one person. I get all that. Everything is a collaboration, but someone's got to be the boss. Someone's got to be the adult in the room, right? Job titles and org charts exist for a reason. You need a president or a GM, or you need the president clearly over the GM or the GM over the coach. These things need to exist if you're going to have any type of forward momentum. And the Titans are seemingly just doubling down on a dumb move from before. And now they're going to go have the guy who was brought in to work in collaboration with the former GM to hire the new GM to then work with the coach who just had the second worst season in franchise history after 1 year. It's a mess, David. If you can make sense of it, please do, because I certainly can't.
Hey, one other NFL note. I wanted to ask you, because I know you tweeted about the Will Levis to Calvin Ridley play, and you didn't like the celebration. And you actually said in one of the replies that it was different than what Mike Evans did. Kind of take me through that train of thought, because you were more, I guess, disappointed with you're getting your butts kicked and you're celebrating.
Yeah, look, Mike Evans was competing in a win and end game. It's so different, right? I know it's late in the game to get that, but they're competing for a playoff spot. Will Levis had a terrible season. He was benched. He was put back in. He started the game that he was put back in as a starter against the Texans, going 3 and out, and then throwing an interception on the second series. They're down multiple scores to the Texans' backups, and they're finishing out a 3-14 season where they're going to have the number 1 draft pick. You combine all those factors, and then he completes one pass to Calvin Ridley to get over 1,000 yards, and he's doing a stupid money dance at the end of it, right? I don't care about a guy getting excited for his teammate to get a bonus or reach a milestone or any of that. I think people misconstrued what I'm angry about. It's the optics of this disastrous season for the Titans, mixed with a quarterback who's been a big disappointment, doing a stupid money dance. And, oh, by the way, David, the very next play, he fumbles the handoff on an end around, and the Texans scoop and score it for a touchdown. So perfectly summed up the Titans season. CBS was showing the dance in slow-mo, and they cut back late as Levis is handing the ball off to the hip of a receiver that's going in motion, and Derek Barnett of the Texans returns it for a touchdown. Perfectly summed up the Titan season. That's what I'm upset about. I know how the league works, and I have no problem with players and teammates getting excited and trying to get guys a bonus or get them to some sort of milestone. I got no issue with that. It's everything that combined with that for the Titans and their season.
Chad, some chatter about maybe Sark to the NFL, other college football coaches to the NFL. And, I was reminded earlier in the show, like, this college football coach, you're dealing with so much. It's not only year-round, it's year-round stress, right? It's different than year-round job. It's year-round stress. Do you think it makes sense for a program knocking on the door of a national championship, or a coach of a program knocking on the door, or one of the top 10 programs in college football, to really think about the NFL? Because financially it's better, but also they replace you a lot quicker in the NFL.
I think it'd be stupid not to think about it. If you haven't had a lot of NFL experience, you do have to factor in, if you're having a lot of success in your current job, hey, do I really want to take the opportunity cost of what I could accomplish at this place versus taking that step to have a less workload, no doubt, right, with everything that goes into being a head coach in college, if you're an NFL head coach. Is that sort of piece worth it to give up something where you're having success? I think it's an individual decision, David, for every coach as to what they want to do. We actually had this discussion on our show yesterday where I'm a little surprised there's not more college names being floated for some of these jobs. And I actually randomly mentioned David Shaw, who was a guy at Stanford that every coaching cycle in the NFL, he was mentioned for a job, that he was sort of the NFL-ready type coach when he was at Stanford. And lo and behold, last night we catch word that David Shaw actually interviewed for the Bears job. So I think that would make some sense. If I'm looking at college coaches that I think would translate well to the NFL, Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian would be another one. I think Kenny Dillingham is going to be successful wherever he ends up. But those are just a few names that comes to mind. There's not a lot of guys that are really good in college right now that I would immediately jump to and say, oh, that's a no-brainer for an NFL team. I do think we're in a spot right now where a lot of the good college coaches are really good college coaches. And I don't see that necessarily translating to the league.
Talking to Chad Withrow here on TexAgs Live. Chad, it was a rough end of the season for A&M. November was terrible. December was not good either. I'm in a weird spot when it comes to evaluating them because I'm still in a very much wait-and-see mode. But I believe in Coach Elko. There's something about the way, and look, press conferences don't tell you everything, but the way he interacts with his guys, how detail-oriented he is, and I know what the program looked like before he got there. But I'm in a point where I'm like, I still got to wait and see. Where are you with Texas A&M based on every year, like they're knocking on the door and then they're completely not knocking?
I really like Mike Elko. I think he's a ball coach. I think he's no nonsense. I think there's a lot of points in time where it's kind of the perfect intersection of coach and program and what that program needs from a culture standpoint. And I'm not saying that Jimbo Fisher wasn't a ball coach or any of that, but it feels like Mike Elko is kind of what Texas A&M needed. It's almost like a dash of cold water over the face to wake you up, but also sort of humble things out a little bit, where A&M got so much talk under Jimbo Fisher and very few results in the end. I think Mike Elko is all substance driven, right? You know exactly where he's coming from. You know exactly what type of guy he is. His players understand that consistency. I think that level of consistency is really going to help A&M. He's also a great defensive coach, which is going to help. You have the resources there that's going to back him, where he's going to be able to get really good players. So I thought it was a very successful year one. It was a disappointing end. I was surprised as much as anyone they lost to USC with how many players USC had out in that game. But all in all, I think you got to feel good about season one under Elko and what's to come for that program. I think you look out across the SEC, and this is a fascinating offseason because they weren't the best conference in college football this year. I'm willing to call it and say it. The Big Ten was better. Now, the Big Ten's also very top-heavy. I think the bottom of the SEC was probably better than the bottom half of the Big Ten, but the top of the SEC was not as good as the top of the Big Ten. So who's going to emerge? Because you got the teams that had success that aren't really going to go anywhere. Georgia, Tennessee, Texas. I'm talking about the three teams that made the playoff. I think are going to be right there in the mix for that again next year. But A&M isn't going to sit still. LSU isn't going to sit still. Alabama looks like a train wreck right now. Is that true? Or are they going to turn it around this offseason to be really good next year? Florida's going to get better, right? South Carolina is going to return a lot and should be pretty good next year. I think it's a fascinating offseason going into next year of what this conference is going to look like. And I fully expect Mike Elko and Texas A&M to be a player in that discussion.
Yeah, I'm not a believer that the SEC is completely down. I think this year, like you said, Big Ten is better. Maybe I'm in the minority. I think Georgia wins the national championship last year if they were let in. I think they were better than Michigan last year. This year, I think Ohio State obviously looks like the best team. So let's kind of caddy what's left here. Ohio State, Texas, huge matchup. Obviously, I'm rooting for the Buckeyes in this one. If Ohio State plays the way they played the last couple of weeks, they're going to run away with it. If Texas plays the way they've played the last couple of weeks, I think Ohio State runs away with it still.
You know, we have Ohio State great Bobby Carpenter come on our show every week, who hosts a bunch of shows. And obviously a big Ohio State guy, lives in Columbus. And I asked him yesterday about Ohio State, and I said, do you think that the loss to Michigan was necessary to go on this run for Ohio State? That they needed that level of anger and motivation, and nobody thinks we're good, and everybody thinks we're all of that. Did they need it? And he kind of paused, said, I don't know, because it's tough to go back and see when a total reset happened. But whatever happened in that game offensively is where Chip Kelly changed. And Chip Kelly just decided, which everyone in college football knew, hey, I got three of the best receivers in the country. Any one of these three guys would be the number one receiver on pretty much any other team across America. And I've got probably the best freshman receiver in the history of the sport. Let's throw it deep with these guys. Let's give them a chance to change the game. That softened up the defensive line. They've been able to run it also. I said when I saw the first half against Tennessee that if this Ohio State team shows up, they will win the national championship with ease. And they beat Oregon. They're up 34-0 in that game in the first half. I think they're going to handle Texas. Texas really has been a good team, but not overly impressive with how they've had to win games. I think Ohio State's the best team in the country right now. I really like them against the Longhorns. I think on the other side, I like Notre Dame to get it done. I think I've been sleeping on Notre Dame ever since that loss to Northern Illinois, but I'm really impressed with just their knowledge of their own identity. They know exactly who they are. A great defensive team that's got a stable of good running backs and a quarterback who's essentially another running back who's really good at what he does. So I like their identity against Penn State, and I think Ohio State's going to continue to roll. I really do. I think they're your national champion, and I don't know that they're going to have a game that's single digits moving forward the way they're playing. They're clearly the best roster in college football, and they finally decided to call plays and play like that.
Chad, if the season ended tomorrow for Penn State or for Ohio State, have James Franklin and Ryan Day done enough to change the narrative around what they do and their programs?
So Ryan Day, no, and James Franklin, no. And here's why. James Franklin was gifted the greatest draw that you could get. You know, you could talk your way around it all you want if you're a Penn State fan, but getting SMU at home, especially the way SMU played in that game, and then getting Boise State, that is a dream draw. If you're going to play in that first round of the college football playoff, I can't think of a more favorable draw than getting those two teams. So they did to me what they were supposed to do. They were impressive against SMU. I didn't think they were going to blow them out the way they did, but they won that game. They won with relative ease against Boise State. I expected both of those things. Winning this next round would be the unexpected. This is a toss-up game. If he does that in this environment and he gets the national championship game, I do think that the narrative around James Franklin changes a lot because now we've seen him compete and play in a national championship game. But he's got to win this next round. Is that fair? I don't know, but that's just reality because he really hasn't won in this spot before, and we know about his record against top teams on the road. For Ryan Day, I think it's win a national title or bust. I really do. I think anything short of that, and Ohio State fans are going to complain. Ohio State fans refused to show up for a playoff game because they lost to Michigan and allowed 35,000 Tennessee fans to take over their stadium, which I never thought would happen in the shoe. So Ohio State fans are fickle. They are knowledgeable also. They know how good this roster is. They know now the potential of this team because they've seen it in their last two playoff games. So anything but a national championship for Ryan Day will be a disappointment for that fan base.
Chad, great stuff, brother. Thanks so much for your time, man. Happy New Year. Let's talk soon.
Always fun, David. Appreciate you having me on. Let's definitely do it soon.